What's up everybody, how's it going? It's Burke aka Dansgreat here and welcome back to this Final Fantasy X Auto Battle Only Challenge. In the previous part we made some good progress once again, making our way through Beacon L, picking up a couple of teleport spheres, getting an auto potion armor for Wakka, racing through home, beating Evray 2, and then making it through the Via Purifico and beating Isaru's Aeons. So you can see the long road ahead towards Seymour Natus, and this area is notorious for being one of the best areas in the game to level up your characters and to farm for AP, and of course I knew this very well. Now that actually ended up only being one side of the equation and not the one that I ended up focusing on much as I got towards Seymour Natus in the end. So first things first, I wanted to just make sure I could survive and get up to Seymour Natus and activate the save sphere next to him, so that I could have a save in there beforehand so I could prepare for the battle itself. So Wakka was there, kind of quickly popped in there just to see if there was anything that I needed, and before long I was ready to set up and get on with the battles against the mechs that we were going to face along the Highbridge. So these guys are stronger versions of the ones that you encounter when you do the wedding crashing, and to be honest, if your characters aren't pretty highly leveled at this point, for this particular challenge, then you are going to struggle. But thankfully for me, a mixture of evade and counter, which helps you to evade a lot of their most mean attacks, and the fact that they're generally just strong at this stage, was very useful to me, and I was able to do good damage to those guys and evade some significant attacks. Now, one of the things that I completely forgot about when I got here was that Kimahri is at the other end, holding up Seymour Natus, so Kimahri isn't accessible for this section, which is a big shame here. Now, thinking back on it, it made me think of a lot of things, like for example, the fact that Kimahri is a character that a lot of us abandon in our runs because of the nature of his sphere grid, his kind of role in the story. You don't quite get the same personal attachment and bond with him, and I'm not going to go into too much of that, but if you're the kind of player that likes to power level and you like to be a bit OP in your runs, the fact that Kimahri can't benefit from the farming here ends up leaving him even further behind from the rest of the party, which is just another reason why I'm sure a lot of people end up abandoning him, because he just simply can't benefit from the massive amount of AP that's available for this particular section of the game. So that is definitely a shame. But then of course, once I realized that Kimahri wasn't in the lineup, what does become certain is that he is going to be in the lineup against Natus, and he is basically forced to be there. This made me think of so many things, because I was like, hold on, Kimahri's not going to be around on the Highbridge. This means that he's going to be mandatory against Seymour Natus. This also means that whatever armor I gave him last, that's the one that he's going to be stuck with for the battle. So I thought, oh god, is it worth going back to earlier in the Via Purifico to equip him with something that's going to serve him better in this battle? Because what we know about Seymour Natus is that he opens up with the elementals, then he uses break, and then he uses flare. So Kimahri's fire armlet, the one that protects against fire, ice and lightning, would have been a pretty useful thing for him to have equipped, which I wasn't sure if that was what he had on at the time. So I was kind of curious, but I thought, you know what, let me just keep pushing forward, make it to Natus and just see what we're dealing with, and then if I have to, then I might go back and kind of load an earlier save, change Kimahri's armor, and then redo that little section with Isaru and with Evray Altana, and then come back here and see what happens. So that's the kind of stuff that was running through my head as I was on the Highbridge. But as you can see, thankfully for Yuna, it's not too much of a big deal here, because Tidus and Wakka, with their evade and counter especially, they're able to handle business and help her gain some crazy sphere levels and really start to power her up and make her a useful character in this challenge as well. So the general story of the Highbridge was that for the first part, basically getting down there, Tidus and Wakka using their evade and counter and their power to take out the enemies, and Yuna kind of just trying to stay alive and make sure she got the AP points that we got as a result of defeating these powerful enemies that give away a ton of AP and help us to level up pretty fast. Thankfully now that Yuna's back, she can heal us along the way as well, so that wasn't too big of a deal. And to be honest, you only need to encounter maybe 4 or 5 different enemy sets, and you've already made it to the save sphere, which ends up leaving you pretty safe. So you can just heal whenever you want, you can save whenever you want, so that even if something were to go wrong, you've already got a save nearby. And so thankfully the Highbridge wasn't that dangerous in terms of actually staying alive and being able to make progress. So the first part of the mission was pretty easy, and I got to the save sphere, and I could already see just like the potential for racing along the sphere grid with Yuna. And well, since we were facing Natus, she was definitely going to be needing that. Before getting invested in trying to do any kind of grinding on the Highbridge for AP and for levels and that kind of thing, I decided to just give Seymour Natus a go just to see what we were dealing with and how the battle was going to play out. Now, since I knew that the first thing was going to be elementals, again, elementals at this stage, they're pretty tough to customize because a lot of the elemental things that you get, they're steals. And the stuff that gets dropped from enemies, they tend to not have multiple elements to help you defend. So in that sense, it was actually pretty tough, and all I could do was just give Tidus his lightning proof and give Yuna something that gave her magic defense plus 10 as well, because I felt like the coverage was just too low on the other stuff that she had. And so I gave her that, and I just hoped for the best, and I just wanted to go in there and see what was going to happen against Seymour Natus. For Yuna, she basically had a Firewall plus 10 HP, and I figured the rotation for Seymour Natus begins with Ice and then Lightning. So I thought by the time he even gets to Fire, a lot of the battle would have gone by. So I felt like maybe just giving her Magic Defense plus 10 on top of her already high Magic Defense would probably be a decent solution just to keep her in the battle for a bit longer. Just to see what kind of damage we're doing and how the battle even ends up playing out against Natus. So yes, Kimahri is there, and the party that you're forced to do this encounter with is Yuna, Kimahri, and Tidus, the same as Seymour and Anima. First thing I noticed was that auto battle was disabled once again, and this means that all I can really do is just attack Seymour. You could say technically Seymour is to the right of Multi, and that means that it is fair game to just attack Seymour directly here. Even though this is basically, I think, what auto battle would have done anyway if it was actually functional. So in that sense, I wasn't too worried. I was just like, yeah, this is what it is, and I can just use attack here to make progress. Now, yeah, Kimahri had his Confuse Ward equipped, but I didn't change it because I wanted to kind of diligently stick to the rules of the battle here. And so those first Blizzaras came in, and I was already very worried because it was just a lot of damage. And even though Tidus was doing 4,000 himself, I was thinking, like, the damage that we're dealing with here, I don't think we're going to be able to survive for long enough, because Kimahri is already doing about half the damage that Tidus is, and then you've got Yuna who's basically doing no damage at all. So it wasn't actually looking that positive. And already Kimahri got taken out pretty quickly here. So I wasn't really sure how I was going to deal with this. I managed to get him down to the break stage, and of course as a result of that he uses Protect as well. So it was suddenly starting to look a lot more difficult than I had predicted here. With Protect as well, even Tidus was doing less than 2,000 damage per attack. So things were getting pretty concerning here. When you only have a Magic Defense plus 10, and you get hit with Break, then you're going to get taken out as well. So all in all, this was looking like a difficult boss battle to encounter. Shattering Claw aiming for Tidus with Evading Counter was nice because it gave us some free damage against Seymour. And all things said, we still did a good amount of damage here. But especially once the break phase kicked in, there's just nothing you can do because, again, Stoneproof is a big, big problem at this part of the game. Yuna, thankfully, does have Stoneproof, and that's going to be a bit of a savior for us in this particular battle. And so that was the first thing on my mind, like, you need to get Yuna equipped with Stoneproof. But before all of that, as you can see, I loaded up a previous battle. This is the level of kind of dedication and diligence I have for this challenge. I mean, I am trying my best to do everything very legitimately. I literally, like, went back here, reloaded this save, and I just changed this. Instead of kind of doing it in battle or just saying, oh, you know what, guys, I forgot. I hacked in a different one so I didn't have to do it again. I just thought, let me set him up with whatever he's going to have against Seymour Natus so that he's already prepared in advance. And this is one of the things that's very unique about this challenge. Like, literally, by the time you're in the Via Purifico, you have to know that Kimahri is going to be in the party and he's going to be fighting against Natus, and the last chance you're going to have to change his equipment is going to be in this particular part of the game. So if he's not ready for Natus now, you won't get another chance to change it. And so that's like something I've never encountered before. And so that was really cool. And that's why I didn't mind going back as well. It just felt like a different kind of thing that I've had to do for the game, to do something so specific like that. So yeah, I did take the time to go back and to basically beat Isaru and Evre Altana again so that I could have Kimahri with a better setup that was more ready to take on Seymour Natus. So in case you're wondering, yes, every Altana once again went by smoothly, wasn't a problem. Waka survived the Stone Gaze as well. I was curious to see what weapon I was going to get this time. Was wondering if it was going to be another TKO. And it was. So I got another TKO. That's like 3 times now he's been dropped to TKO from a boss battle, which is pretty insane. But yeah, most of that was the same, and it was back to the Highbridge to try to prepare once again for Seymour Natus. Now, this time around, something interesting happened that really made me think differently about this entire setup, and it was something that kind of changed the course of the entire challenge. One thing that I didn't really think about at all was Auto Phoenix. Now, I had assumed before I started the challenge that getting Auto Phoenix was just going to be too tough. Getting Mega Phoenixes as a drop is going to take a long time. You're going to have to get towards basically the end of the game before you start seeing it with even any kind of regularity. And so, to me, it always felt like Auto Phoenix just wasn't going to be an option for, especially not for this stage of the game. But then, as I made my way down the Highbridge, I kind of noticed that I was getting Mega Phoenixes from the battle. So I decided to look this up to see what the drop rate was for Mega Phoenixes, and I quickly realized that there is a 1 in 8 chance that one of the cannon guys drops a Mega Phoenix if you defeat it. 1 if it's a normal one, and 2 if it's an overkill, which Tidus was doing at this particular time. So by the time I got back to the save sphere before Seymour Natus the second time round, I was already up to 5 Mega Phoenixes as a result of a few battles that I did on the Highbridge. So you can imagine what I started to think about doing next. I figured, you know what? I think I am going to need someone with Auto Phoenix in this challenge to make life easier and to be able to survive these encounters where defending against certain moves and staying alive is extremely difficult. So I knew I was on the Highbridge, which was a big farming area anyway, and I figured, you know what? I can keep defeating these guys until I've got 20 Mega Phoenixes, and then give Yuna Auto Phoenix so that she has Stoneproof plus Auto Phoenix, and that would be a great way for me to stay alive and hopefully spend very little time in the break phase for Seymour Natus' battle. So that's generally what the Highbridge ended up becoming. It was an area where I spent a decent chunk of time defeating these mechs over and over and over again until I got enough Mega Phoenixes to give Yuna Auto Phoenix. So it wasn't what I planned when I arrived, but once I realized that that was more possible than I originally thought, and how easily and quickly I was defeating the mechs, I was thinking, you know what, I think this is the best way to treat this area. Not only is Yuna going to be really up to speed, we're going to hit a completely different tier of like attack power. So much so that I decided to not even cash it in. Like I was just letting Waka and Tidus save up like the sphere level because I thought, to be honest, they're already really strong. I'm just more curious about what happens if we end up having Auto Phoenix. So that was the general path, and it did take me quite some time, but I just kind of waited and waited and waited until I picked up enough Mega Phoenixes to get the job done. So that was actually how I spent most of my time on the Highbridge. It was farming for Mega Phoenixes. But before I did all of that, I wanted to go in for one more attempt just to get a feel again for where I was at in the battle. So I did try things one more time, gave Tidus the lightning proof again, and I decided to just give him SOS Null Blaze anyway just to see what would happen here. I figured maybe it might save me in a particular situation. So I went in one more time just to see how we were going to do, just to get a feel for whether or not I could maybe potentially kind of hang if Yuna has Stoneproof and she gets hit by the first break spell. Like, can I just completely bypass the break section if I manage to pull that off? So I went in for attempt 2, but I was pretty sure in my mind that I'd still need to be farming for Mega Phoenixes eventually, once I was done with it. So, attempt 2 against Natus came along, and it was much the same, of course. You can just only do attack, and I just wanted to see how far I could get this time around. The main thing was I'd need to get lucky and have Seymour cast Break on Yuna, who would be immune to it. But yeah, you can see like the magic defense of the boys is really low, so those magic spells are just hurting a lot. All it took was one spell and he was already into SOS HP basically. But you can see in general, getting him past the elemental phase into the break phase doesn't take much time at all. So in terms of what elements do you need to protect against, it's pretty much only lightning and ice. He just doesn't get far enough to use the rest. So from here, if I could do enough damage, I was going to bring him down to the flare phase. But for this to work, basically I needed some certain attacks to go my way. And I was getting some pretty good RNG here. So I was starting to think, wait a minute, maybe I could actually defeat this guy right now. So Tidus got the critical, and he's already down to 12,000 HP. So I completely bypassed the break phase. And when that happens, he moves immediately to flare, which we cannot survive unless we have maximum HP. And so I was suddenly feeling a lot more optimistic here. Then I remembered that Multi uses Cura, and since he's already got Protect, my damage potential became suddenly very low, because we're only doing about 2,000 damage together, and Cura's already healing 1,200. So when Seymour Natus is busting out these flares, and you're only doing about 800 damage per round, suddenly it started looking less likely that I'd be able to hang in the battle long enough to get it done. And so that's exactly what ended up happening. So it made me realize that I could bypass the break phase entirely. So Stoneproof for Tidus and Kimahri, it was impossible anyway, but thankfully it also meant that it wasn't necessary. The only thing was, if I could give Yuna Auto Phoenix, then in the flare phase she can just recover anyone who gets knocked out by it, and I should be able to survive long enough to defeat Seymour Natus. So this battle really kind of solidified my idea of farming for the Mega Phoenixes in order to give Yuna the Auto Phoenix and hopefully make my way through Seymour Natus. So I needed about 15 Mega Phoenixes in order to be able to customize Auto Phoenix, and surprisingly, again, thanks to the ×4 mainly, it was very, very quick. It took me about 12 minutes, I think, something like that. So it would have been about 48 minutes of real-time play, but it was only 12 minutes of recording, and I was able to get them. So I had decent, I think, RNG for it. Because the encounter rate is so frequent and they do appear as an encounter, like the cannon guys appear so frequently, and they also appear as doubles quite frequently too, the odds of you picking up Mega Phoenixes if you're rattling through like a battle every 15 to 20 seconds is going to be pretty high. So thankfully it didn't take that long, and eventually what I did do was to cash in a little bit of the sphere levels I was getting to of course make Yuna stronger anyway because she was lagging behind the rest of the crew, but to make Waka a little bit stronger too, to make sure that he could land overkills as well against the cannon guys. So that was generally the process. It really didn't take that long, but this was a nice like lucrative farming area where I picked up a ton of levels, and I also managed to pick up Mega Phoenixes pretty quickly. Now once again, ideally I think if you really want to go like completely carefully and do everything perfectly, you should probably hang around here and just farm for basically 99 Mega Phoenixes, because that way you can literally give every single character in your party a Mega Phoenix, and it makes the game way, way easier. For me, again, I kept doing the same thing. This is kind of almost like a bit of a speedrunning element at this stage as well. So I'm doing what I need to do to get what I want, and then just move on. So I got enough for one Auto Phoenix, and I figured that's going to get me through this next battle. And the next time I can farm for Mega Phoenixes is going to be in the Zanakan Ruins. So I was pretty sure that even with one Auto Phoenix, I should have a decent chance of making it through far enough to get to the next farming opportunity. And then if it turns out that, let's say, I don't know, for Yunalesca, I need more Auto Phoenix, then I can always farm from the same machines that appear there and just try to do the same thing to pick up some more of it. So that was a general idea that I had, and as a result, basically I was barely 10.5 hours in to a challenge like this. I had stats that looked like the ones I have, and I was ready to take on and hopefully defeat Seymour Natus. So I was making very quick progress, of course due mostly to the ×4 and the reduced cutscenes, but I could have been farming so much more than I have at this point. And I think the Mega Phoenixes that you can farm here are one of the best kind of examples of what is possible. You could literally have an entire party with Auto Phoenix at this stage of the game if you're willing to put the time in to farm these mechs and grab all of the Mega Phoenixes that you can from them. I am going to show one outtake here though. It wasn't all like sunshine and rainbows when I was doing this. Thankfully, I was saving regularly as I went along, because sometimes things can go wrong. There's a low chance of it happening, but this did happen to me once during the farming session I did on the Highbridge. Okay, so what can happen sometimes is you get this particular encounter. where you have 2 of the kickers and 1 of the cannons. If there is a kicker guy who is the final one left out of the enemies, they will start using thrust kick, and thrust kick of course ejects you from the battle. Now if you are unlucky enough, it can eject Tidus and Waka from the battle and leave Yuna by herself, and Yuna by herself at this stage is not strong enough to defeat those guys, so she ended up dying as a result of this. So it was pretty funny. I took out the first 2 easily, then it immediately replied with thrust kick, and because agility is one of the things where my party isn't like super OP, especially not Waka at this stage, they got caught out by that one. It is rare that it plays out like that, but it's definitely possible, and you guys are seeing here how it can end up happening. But I would say just like regularly saving is probably the best way to kind of combat that and stop it from happening. And of course, I think if I cashed in like every single AP point here, Waka might have had enough strength to deal with it as well, potentially. But I mean, it was just kind of funny, like watching it back. I was in a groove of just defeating everything really easily, and just like racking up the AP, getting some Mega Phoenixes, and then suddenly just like seeing the game over screen when I was basically on autopilot was a bit funny. But thankfully, you can make pretty quick progress, and I was saving quite regularly too. So in that sense, it wasn't too bad. But it did give me a little bit of a scare, but we still managed to get through despite that. And I'll show you how things looked once I had enough Mega Phoenixes to get this done. Okay, so literally within about 10 to 12 minutes, I was already at this particular stage. So I had tons of sphere levels to play with, and I got a drop of 4 Mega Phoenixes, so 2 rare drops from the cannons. That's like a 1 in 64 chance. I've definitely had some solid drop RNG in this playthrough so far. But with that, I was ready to customize Yuna's Stoneproof ring to give her both Stoneproof and Auto Phoenix at the same time, which was going to be a very powerful combination moving forward. And with this, I was pretty sure that as long as I didn't get any silly like RNG stuff happening, I could definitely get this done. So that's what Yuna was equipped with. Her weapon isn't that important, but having a sensor is kind of nice when you don't have auto battle. At least you can keep track of what's going on. So I decided to keep that so that I had the sensor. And for Tidus, once again, I kept him with the yellow shield just to protect him early on from some of that onslaught. So I was ready for the rematch, and this time I was pretty sure I could get it done. Even though I didn't cash in all of Tidus' sphere levels, he still has plenty left over. He is a bit stronger because, of course, I do want to spend as little time in the battle as possible to reduce the chances of things going wrong. So you can see he's doing about 1,300 damage more than he was in my initial attempts. So he's definitely stronger, but I still have like 30 unused sphere levels if I wanted to, if I was still struggling. At this stage, I was just kind of curious to see how the phases would go, because I'm doing more damage, and that means the timing of things is a bit different. So Tidus comes in here, and already he switches into the break phase. So ironically, even though I'm stronger now, as a result of the damage that I'm doing and the slightly different agility and stuff, you actually encounter a break phase. So he will be using break in this one, even though he didn't previously. So this time I was lucky, and he went for break on the one person who was immune to it, and as a result I was able to break through and get to the flare phase. So once this happened, I was pretty sure that the battle was already over, but obviously you just had to wait and see if I was going to be able to pull it off. I mean, Protect is doing such good work for him here. I mean, Tidus hitting over 5,000 is huge, but bringing that back down was really effective. But you can see I got really, really lucky here. I didn't have enough damage done to prevent a second break being used, but thankfully there's a 1 in 9 chance of Yuna being targeted twice, and Yuna was targeted twice both times, so thankfully that helped me a lot. I still would have come through in this battle, I'm pretty sure I would, but it saved me some time to have that good RNG with Yuna being attacked twice. And so with that, I was able to bring it down to the flare phase. Kimari obviously got taken out pretty badly there, but you can see it does about 2,400, 2,500 damage, so that means that Tidus could also survive one without needing to be revived from Mega Phoenix. So again, at this stage I was pretty sure that I was going to be able to win this battle. Only problem would have been if Yuna got a flare very early on. That could have really kind of messed things up, but in terms of the party members he chose to attack, I did get very good RNG for this battle, so I definitely have to admit that. But as you can see here, Tidus's criticals are just coming in really clutch here. Those extra luck boosts have really made a big difference. So already down to 3,500, and hopefully this should mean that we can get things done. Even though he survives this one here, it was only a matter of time before we managed to wrap things up. So yeah, Seymour Natus was definitely very tough at the start, and with the setup that I initially had against him, I pretty much couldn't have won. But the difference of adding Auto Phoenix to Yuna, increasing our stats a little bit so that we could do about 25% more damage, and some good RNG on the run itself, meant that I was able to defeat Seymour Natus without him causing me a giant headache. And with that, we could move on to the Calmlands and towards Mount Gagazet, which was an area that I was fearing quite a lot going into this challenge. So, Tidus and Yuna have their moment in Makalania, Kimahri watches on creepily, and it's time for us to move on to the Calmlands. Now, what was on my mind here was a few things, because as of this point, there are a few more options that are available to you that you don't necessarily have to do, but that might still benefit the challenge. So first things first, I wanted to just see how I was doing in the battles, just to get a measure of where I was at. At this stage again, because I had some time on the Highbridge to level up my characters and the general kind of way that things had been going, I was pretty confident that random encounters weren't going to be a problem here, and I would be able to get through them and basically just kind of explore the Calmlands at will without too much problem. And so once I arrived, once again, as usual, get the 3 musketeers back on there because I do want Wakka's attacking prowess and his accuracy. And from there it was kind of just setting things back up again. I knew that we had like the wolves and stuff, and there was a few more status effect issues, including petrification, so I was kind of just wary of the status effects more so than any kind of damage. So we have poison to deal with, we have potentially sleep to deal with, we have petrification that we could run into as well. So I just wanted to generally see if I could kind of protect against some of that stuff. Now, I debated giving Kimahri the evading counter here, but I was like, I don't need it at this point, and there might be a very specific battle or situation where I wish I had a teleport sphere. So I just continued to kind of leave it alone at this stage and just keep going. And until I needed it, I thought let's just leave the teleport sphere and just push on. Kimahri wasn't able to cash in on what people were doing on the Highbridge, but thankfully he himself had some sphere levels built up from before, from what we were doing on Beaconel when we were trying to farm for the auto potion. So I figured since everyone else has moved on, it's Kimahri's turn to catch things up here and bring himself back up to speed, and that gave him a lot more parity with the rest of the team. And so before long we had our first encounter, and it was one of the kind of standard ones that you get here. The only thing I wanted to be sure of was that Wakka was connecting with the Neberos and taking those guys out, because they do afflict poison, and well, you can get 2 of them in one battle, so I figured maybe that could be annoying. But he was more than up to the task, and even Tidus and Kimahri now and then, they were landing hits against them. So overall I was feeling very confident. I mean, these guys at this stage, they're very OP, they're doing a lot of damage. And so, especially like the P. Birdman calls them small fry sometimes. It's kind of funny the way he refers to them. But I think you guys get what I mean, like small fry random encounters. You can see at this stage they've basically become a non-factor. Almost all of them are one-hit KOs, if not 2. Stuff like the Flan will take longer to kill, but again, they're so slow compared to us as well now. The odds of them surviving long enough to do any kind of meaningful damage is close to 0. So, especially for the small fry in the Calmlands, it was happy days, and we managed to sail through because we're just so powerful, and Kimahri and Tidus both have piercing weapons, which helps them to slice through a lot of tougher enemies as well and do more damage. One thing I did make sure I did was to visit the shop that you see, and it's only available one time, so it does make it missable. There is that magic counter buckler for Tidus, which is a one of a kind, and for a challenge like this, any opportunity you get to do counterattacks is always going to be useful. So I made sure to pop into that guy and buy the magic counter for Tidus, because there might be a situation where I can pair it up with like evading counter to get even more attacks in against a difficult enemy or a boss. At this stage I had so much guild to play with as well, I just started to kind of buy more like random stuff. I quickly noticed that there was a curative Taj there as well, and so even though Riku wasn't a character that I was using at this point, I thought, you know what, it's worth getting, you just never know. Auto med is something that's very hard to come by, and so it could save us in a niche situation. So I did buy the curative Taj as well, and even the Savior Bangle for Lulu, because once again Stoneproof still at this stage was pretty much impossible to get from anything. and so I thought, why not grab that as well. And so with that, we made it to the middle of the Calmlands where I could throw a save in just to make sure things were okay. And this time I decided to turn my attention towards Remium Temple and the Chocobo race there, because there are some juicy prizes there that could potentially prove useful further down the line. And the first example is of course the Wings to Discovery, which you can use to make a break HP limit armor. Because we're going to be encountering some serious stuff as we get towards the end of the game and in the post game, having the ability to at least give one of your characters a quote-unquote free break HP limit was going to be huge, so I definitely wanted to pick that up. So I decided to start heading towards the Chocobo trainer, and of course in order to do so I had to encounter some of the more difficult enemies in the Calmlands. And thankfully for me it was much more of the same, so even the big fry compared to the small fry was still very easy to defeat. Stuff like the Malboro is just too slow, and so when you have three guys that are pretty quick and pretty OP, and you have an enemy that has a defense stat of 1, they're just not going to last very long. So even with 27,000 HP, the Malboro just can't hang, and so we managed to take it out pretty quickly. Encounter some Chimera Brains too, and they were also fine. They don't have that much HP. They can be damaging, and there are 2 of them, but once again, the fact that we were just so strong, and the fact that we had piercing, and the strength that we had, and the agility that we had, meant that there was pretty much close to nothing in the Calmlands that could cause us any problems, except for one particular encounter which you'll see a little bit later. But my priority for now was to train the Chocobo, grab the Chocobo, head towards the Remium Temple, and start getting myself those prizes for doing the race. These weren't like immediately necessary, but thinking ahead, I was like, I just want to make sure I have the Wings of Discovery under my belt so that I could get break HP limit whenever I wanted. I'll show you guys a very abridged version of the Chocobo races, it's not that relevant. You only need to get 3 chests in order to get the Wings to Discovery, which is pretty cool. It's pretty easy to do for most people, even if you're a bit rusty and you haven't had much practice with it for a long time, or you just generally struggle with it, it's not too bad. 4 of them gives you a pendulum. I thought 3 was relatively easy, so I thought 4 shouldn't be too bad. Just might as well grab the pendulums anyway. But then if you get 5 chests, you end up getting 3 stars. Now 3 stars you could sell for a lot of gil, but that's not really something I need at this point. And for customization purposes, they give you 1 MP cost, which again for this particular challenge is not relevant. So I decided not to waste any time getting the 5 chests. I topped out at 4 and I quickly got back on track, and I started to head towards Defender X to see what the deal was against that guy and if we could get him taken out as well. So I didn't even go into the monster trainer arena at this point. I just wanted to push on and see if I could make it to Gagazette before kind of turning back and messing around with any kind of monster capturing shenanigans. So Defender X is a very straightforward battle, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. He's of course a tanky boy, so having piercing is going to be useful once again, and it's another reason why Tidus's weapon having piercing is definitely important. In terms of HP, we are going to struggle here, because he does have a big Haymaker attack, which is unavoidable with Evade Encounter, and it does about 4,000 damage. Now, we don't have the ability to cast Protect, we don't have Auto Protect, we don't have SOS Protect, and our HP is well below 4,000. So, in that sense, I was wondering if we were going to be able to defeat it in time. So, in my mind, that's what it was. It was a race against time to see if you could defeat this guy before his Haymaker ended up taking out your entire party. So since I was pretty much blazing through everything and I had piercing for 2 out of my 3, I thought maybe it's still possible and it's worth a shot. So I decided to trigger the battle and just fight against Defender X and see what we can do. Now it's kind of funny, when you have the cutscene remover, it obviously skips ahead straight to the battle, and that causes some kind of minor glitch where Defender X is stuck on his heels, so it looks a bit weird, but when you have the cutscene remover, that's what happens. So yeah, as you can see from some of the early going, this guy has a good kind of HP to defense ratio, and so I had a feeling that I was gonna struggle here, because Waka was basically doing little to no damage, and even though Tidus was doing well with his 4,000, it kind of felt like, especially when you throw in the Haymakers, I'm just not going to have enough time here to get this done. So I was kind of just sitting back, chilling, just waiting to see what was going to happen. Was a bit unlucky because he kept picking on Kimari, who didn't have Evade Encounter. So this was also like a bad RNG run here at the same time. But Waka here, his high potions are kind of irrelevant because he dodges the normal attack anyway, and the Haymaker, he just doesn't have enough HP with his auto potion. So even though it kind of looks easy enough at the moment, like it looks like smooth sailing, as soon as those Haymakers come in, it's not something that you can really deal with, unfortunately. So I was kind of watching here just to see what was going to happen, but I was pretty sure that this battle was done already. And especially once Waka was left on his own, I think it was pretty clear that it wasn't going to work. So I know what you're thinking. Why don't you just have Yuna in the party instead of Waka and have her use Auto Phoenix on the people that die as a result of Haymaker? And I thought, yeah, you know what? That's actually a good idea. So that's pretty much exactly what I ended up doing. So this battle here dragged on a bit longer because you have to wait 3 turns for Haymaker to happen. But the inevitable did happen in the end because Waka's just not doing enough damage here. So even seeing this though, seeing how long he survived afterwards made me think, you know what? Maybe if you get some lucky RNG and Tidus is left for a long time, he might be able to kind of get the win. But I thought putting Yuna in is probably the better strategy here because Waka's just not contributing that much attackingly, and having an Auto Phoenix person might be the better option. So that's what I went for on the next attempt. Yuna did have some sphere levels to add in, and since her HP and her defense is so low, and she doesn't have evading counter, I wanted to make sure she could survive at least one of the punches, so I cashed in everything I had for her just to give her a little bit of extra push, and that took her HP up to a slightly higher tier, and she could definitely survive at least one hit from Defender X. Once she got far enough, I quickly realized that I could actually shift her onto Riku's grid, which has a ton of HP at the start, and so I did use one of my level 2s and I moved her onto Riku's grid, and within the space of like 10 or 15 sphere levels, she's going to be boosting her HP by like another 1,000. So in that sense, I think it was smart for Yuna to get to that stage as well, because it made a big difference to her HP potential. And so with that, I got Yuna in the party this time for the next attempt, and I decided to try and see what would happen if we take her on now. Decided to go with Waka this time because I thought if I have 2 people that don't have evading counter, then we're just going to get slaughtered. So having 2 evading counters instead of 1 was definitely, I think, a better choice, even though Waka didn't have piercing, which would make him do notably less damage. So now is a case of how often is Yuna going to get attacked by the normal attack here. And so honestly, it felt like after a while it felt like this probably wasn't going to work either, because Tidus is pretty much the only legitimate damage dealer, and expecting Yuna to not receive a regular hit or a Haymaker for that long was pretty unrealistic. And so it didn't take long before Yuna was KO'd. And without a second person with Auto Phoenix, that meant that this attempt was likely going to be over as well, unless we got a bit lucky with RNG and criticals and that kind of thing. So after Yuna died, I was actually pretty sure that this battle wasn't going to be won. And then I let things carry on a bit anyway. I mean, it's already on auto battle, you can just kind of sit back and watch how things go. But I thought maybe I get some lucky RNG where most of his attacks target Tidus, who can then evade and counter back with a lot of damage in return. So I was kind of just waiting to see what was going to happen. And fortunately, Waka took the Haymaker, which meant that Tidus was going to get a lot of attacks back to back here. And so I thought, you know what, maybe we could actually pull this one off. So I decided to kind of just hang in there and just wait and see what was going to happen here, because he was going to dodge at least 3 of those attacks, reply with his normal attack that was going to do 4,000 damage each, and then he was going to land his own attacks at the same time. So I figured maybe all of that damage is going to be enough to take out Defender X before the next Haymaker comes. So I was kind of just intently watching here to see what was going to happen and see if Tidus could survive this and end up grabbing the win in the clutch. But unfortunately it didn't happen. The Haymaker still came, and I thought this was pretty good RNG still at this stage, and it still wasn't enough. So I was kind of thinking I'm trying to push my luck a bit too far in terms of RNG. So I decided to give up on Defender X for now, because I didn't want to kind of overdo it in terms of the RNG requirements for the battle. And so this meant that instead of trying to push forward and ram my head against Defender X, I might as well head back, go to the monster arena, and try to capture some monsters, because everything that I'd faced so far in the Calmlands was pretty easy. Even without like the bells and whistles of having invade encounter and stuff, I was pretty sure that I could deal with the random encounters here and capture enough to reopen the arena, grab some extra goodies, and to unlock Chimera Geist. So I headed towards the monster arena to activate things there and to start the capturing process. In terms of the capture weapons themselves, I would have loved to have added evade encounter to them, but I decided to give Titus a piercing one, just him, because I didn't want to waste too much in terms of the level 2 key spheres. And so I just decided to keep Yuna in the party here. I thought she's got Auto Phoenix anyway, and Titus and Waka are doing very well, and they're doing massive damage. So I thought, you know what, screw it, let's just go for this and see what we can do. So I decided to start capturing, and my first capture was a Malboro, which is pretty funny. I mean, the odds of it appearing at that part of the map is pretty low, but I thought, yeah, like, if I've started off with a Malboro, then I think I should be fine. So this party of 3, including Yuna, who I kept in because she's got the Auto Phoenix now, which means that she could be needed more in boss battle situations, and as a result, she's going to need better stats. So I thought if she's in the party for these kind of situations where I'm drop farming, or I'm capturing, or I'm just doing like that kind of extra stuff, at least you can pick up some more sphere levels along the way and just get stronger as we go. So that's why I kept her in there, and I decided to just start capturing. And so, as expected, things went pretty smoothly. I mean, even the Curl, which is you know, one of the stronger enemies here, it's just not fast enough. Like, yes, it petrified Waka there, but I mean, all things said, it was just never going to be quick enough or problematic enough to cause a game over or anything like that. So in general, the capturing was a pretty smooth process. So I was moving Yuna along the sphere grid, everything was going fine. She was starting to grab those juicy early HP spheres from Riku's grid, and she was closing in on 3000, which is pretty much catching up to the boys, which was looking really good. And the capturing was going fine too, so no problem so far. And again, within 5 or 10 minutes, I'd already pretty much captured almost everything in the Calmlands without any issues at all. So even like Chimera, Brain, whatever, like no problem. Just completely blasting through these guys. Then I encountered something which I hadn't encountered up until now, which initially I was a little bit worried by. The double Anaconda encounter. Now, thankfully they don't have that much HP, so Titus and Waka attacking them is enough to take one down. And so the encounter was completely just kind of like uneventful, and I took them out within seconds. But then I encountered them again. This time it was an ambush, and before I could even realize what was going on, Titus had been petrified, and so as a result, Waka had to do it all by himself. But before he could, Waka got stone gazed too, and then both those guys were petrified, and it sonic gazed the shit out of Yuna. So especially at times 4 speed, it literally went from like 100 to 0 within 5-10 seconds. I got completely destroyed, and I lost all of my capture progress. Thankfully, the capture process wasn't too bad, but I got completely cocky here, and I forgot to put petrification protection on Titus and Waka. I knew Yuna had stoneproof, so I was feeling fairly confident that I'd be fine anyway. But of course, if both Titus and Waka are petrified, Yuna's attack is so poor that she can't get you out of trouble, and Auto Phoenix won't help you either. So I quickly realized that that was not the best idea. To be fair, with Anacondors, even if you do have Stonewalled, there's still a decent chance that you're going to get petrified, so they're just an annoying encounter. Like I say, petrification is one of the most dangerous statuses for this part of the game with these kinds of restrictions. So I was just like really wary of those guys, and I set out on the hunt one more time to try and capture these guys and make sure I didn't get myself in any trouble against the Anacondors. Thankfully, as you've generally seen so far, even with the capturing weapons, that whole process was very quick, so I barely lost maybe like 5 to 7 minutes of progress, so it wasn't the end of the world at all. And before I knew it, I was already basically back up to speed. And I made sure to save once I got most of what I needed, just to make sure I didn't have to do it again. And so I did encounter a couple more kind of Anaconda encounters, but all in all I was okay. I mean, that Sonic Tail attack is also very powerful, and their agility is not too bad either. So they're just like a really bad matchup, unless you really do have some decent stats and you're able to take care of these guys. Now, things would have been a bit easier if I had like all of my like best weapons, but I definitely wasn't going to waste like some of my best stuff on a capture weapon. So yeah, ultimately I sorted it out, it was fine. And once I was done with all of the capturing, I decided to make sure I decided to just ride the Chocobo back to give myself the best chance of making it back without any dangerous Anaconda encounters that could give me a game over potentially. And so with that, it was back to the trainer, and I was able to unlock the arena, and of course unlock Chimera Geist in the process. Now, I was of course curious and wondering, like, can I defeat Chimera Geist? Is that possible? And so of course I gave it a go. I mean, why not? But, as I've mentioned a few times already, one of the most difficult things at this stage of the game is to have protection against multiple elements. It's really difficult because the enemies don't drop them, and your ability to farm for Arctic winds, lightning marbles, bomb cores, fire gems, ice gems, it's impossible at this stage. Enemies just do not drop them. You have to farm them by stealing. The ability to customize good elemental protection basically doesn't exist at this stage. And since Chimera Geist relies so heavily on its elemental attacks, it was already a very bad matchup for me. And so, yeah, it did not go too well. I couldn't beat Chimera Geist. Definitely can be possible. Like, once I've got the right armor, it's guaranteed that I'll be able to defeat it. But for this particular stage and this particular setup, I definitely wasn't ready to take on Chimera Geist. And so I didn't spend too much time with it. I mean, fundamentally, without elemental protection, unless you absolutely completely overpower it with like break damage limit, or you have like ultra high agility and you can just land like 20 hits before he can even land 3 or 4, then yeah, maybe you can do it. But it was definitely unrealistic for this particular stage, so I didn't waste too much time. I took on Chimera Geist anyway just for fun, took a whooping, but I felt like I was ready to sort of continue on and give Defender X another crack. But before I could do that, since the main threat in this battle was Haymaker and the fact that my main attacking guys couldn't survive it, I felt like I was at a bit of a level wall here. I needed to get strong enough to survive against the Haymaker move. So the sphere levels that I had picked up along the way, I started to cash them in. So once again, you're watching Yuna get back up towards the 3,000 mark because we got the game over, so I had to kind of redo this, this process again. This time, I decided to cash in some of those Tidus sphere levels as well. He had 36 of them to play with, and I knew that there was some health along the way as well. And well, of course, he's going to get even stronger as a result, more strength, more defense, all of that good stuff. So I felt like this was a good time to do it because I was going to head up Gagazet as well. And well, we all know Gagazet is a mighty tough area, so I decided to definitely just take a little bit of time to get these boys up like another tier of HP and strength. Nothing too crazy. Again, I didn't want to cash in absolutely everything for all of the characters at this stage. I was just kind of incrementally moving along and just seeing at what stage it was going to be enough for me to get through. But Kimari especially, I knew he had a lot of potential because he was moving down Tidus' grid that had like just so much extras on there as well. We were definitely making good progress in terms of levels and stats. And I think the best part of it for me so far in that sense was that a lot of it was done during drop farming. Like, there basically wasn't a time where I specifically said I need to get 15, 20 sphere levels to increase my power to X level, and that's the only reason I'm doing these encounters. It was pretty much always looking for something useful and then spending, say, 30, 50, 100 encounters searching for that, and then during that process picking up like an extra 20, 30, 50 sphere levels as well. So it was like really organic, and it's worked out really naturally in that sense, which I've enjoyed. Because, again, by nature, I'm not a power leveling kind of player anyway. So being able to kind of do it this way was satisfying for me as well, because I felt like I didn't need to dedicate time specifically to level up, which was pretty nice. So yeah, I did get the boys a bit stronger, and you can see Waka's around 3,800 HP now. So he's definitely much closer to being able to survive against a Haymaker. Now, Tidus was further away, but I was curious to see what I could do with the armors that we had. Maybe give him like a HP plus. Because in terms of like status defense, you don't need anything. Elemental defense, you don't need anything. So I figured all we need to do is just get the HP up as high as possible and just see what you can do, really. And so I noticed that he had an HP plus 10, and I thought, you know what? Elixirs are not that difficult to get. If you really, really need some, you can find some. And so I thought, why not just give this guy an HP plus 30%, and then that way, even without leveling up further, you can just do it. You can just get past Defender X using this particular armor instead. So I decided to give Tidus that, and I thought that should take him up high enough to survive the Haymaker. And I think once Tidus and Waka can survive a Haymaker each, then it should be pretty much plain sailing, and we should be able to get this battle done. So that took him over 4,000 HP. Waka with 3,800, I thought, surely now I should be able to get this done. So I decided to go back in for another attempt against Defender X. It's funny though, throughout this entire game so far, Waka has not picked up a single HP plus 10 from any enemy, which is kind of funny. But I didn't have anything to customize it, so I thought let's just get on with it and see if 3,798 is going to be enough. Again, Tidus has gone up a notch in terms of his attack, so he's doing a good 5,000 here for every attack, which is going to be even better for us. Waka, again, he doesn't have piercing, so it's not like significantly more. But Tidus here, again, he's the star of the show. He's got the piercing, he's got the evading counter, he's got the highest strength, so he's the one we're going to be relying on the most to get this done. Now, since you've seen the battle a few times already, I thought let's just get on with it here and speed things up a little bit. I did forget about Blast Punch though. My little theory about like them having enough HP to deal with Haymaker was kind of moot, because he does use Blast Punch quite a lot, and so since they don't have a way to heal back to maximum HP, it wasn't really ever going to work. So yeah, that whole strategy with like get them over the amount of HP needed to survive Haymaker was kind of a bit of a non-starter because of Blast Punch, which I completely forgot about. But as you can see, we had basically the same RNG as before, where Tidus was the last one left and he got a bunch of attacks in before the next Haymaker. So ultimately all it was that he had a bit more strength, and because he was doing 1,000 more damage per hit, that was all it took to defeat Defender X. So it was nothing too fancy here, it was just basically getting stronger and just hanging in the battle long enough and basically not having Tidus be hit with the first 2 Haymakers, and that was all it took to defeat Defender X. So thankfully that meant that I was free to go to either the Sunken Cave or to Mount Gagazet. So I think I can start to wrap things up now for this particular part as well. In the next one we will be going to the Sunken Cave first and then going on to Mount Gagazet as we begin the path towards Seymour Flux, of course, which is a boss that I'm sure a lot of you are curious about, and hopefully your curiosity will be satisfied in the next episode. Things are continuing to go pretty well, and I'm still not completely putting my foot on the gas, as you're seeing. I mean, there is still more like power leveling I can do, more farming I can do, but even with this kind of setup I'm managing to continue to make my way through the game, and it's barely been about 11 hours at this point, and I'm already at Mount Gagazet. So it's been a hell of a run so far. I'm having a really good time with it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how far I can take this, because it's really turned into something bigger than I was expecting. And of course the absolutely huge response that part 1 has got blew me away as well, and it motivated me even further to show you guys how far you can go with this and what is possible and what isn't going to be possible. So I'm really excited to continue both recording the series and to sharing what I have recorded with you guys in future episodes as well. So do look out for the next one where we will be climbing Gagazet and facing off against Seymour Flux. Thank you as always for the massive support. Once again, remember, early access on Patreon along with lots of other perks, and it helps the channel in a massive way. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will see you soon for the next one. Thank you for watching. Take care.